Okay, so I've typed here some of the guides. They're from the textbook, but I was just going to talk about them a little bit to give you a little bit more information. So we're going to be doing models and applications. It has to do with word problems, applying some of these concepts of linear equations. So step one, it says identify known quantities. So what do you know in the problem? Do they tell you how many feet something is, how long something is, or the temperature of something? I don't spend a lot of time on this at the beginning, but you do have to pay attention to what you know. Number two, assign a variable. Now that's important. Now a lot of times people will pick like X, or sometimes they'll use M for miles or something like that. I have a tendency to do things like that. I try not to do variables that might be confusing, like I wouldn't use O for oranges because it might look like a 0. But one of the things you want to do is you want to say what your variable represents. Because if you do use something like X or Y, you might not know what it's representing, and it may make a big difference to you in the end. Okay. Sometimes you're going to need more than one variable. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times I'll do that, like I'll use, maybe there's 3 numbers that we want to add. So maybe I'll say A plus B plus C. And then later, I'll figure out a representation for maybe A and B or something. So it's like a temporary thing where you're using some extra variables to kind of organize your thoughts. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to use your paper. Sometimes students are like, I don't want to write it down. It's going to be wrong. I'm going to have to erase it. You know what? These problems, we write, we draw, we try to get our thoughts organized, and eventually we get to number 4. Where we write an equation. So we want to be able to write that equation, because once we have the equation, then it's like problems in 2.2, where we're just solving the equation. Okay, and then step 5, solve the equation. So you forget it's a word problem here. You solve the equation. And then when you get an answer, you need to be able to say what that answer is. Like, oh, the box is 4 feet long and 6 feet wide, or whatever. You'll want to include units of measure. The person earned $200 or something like that. One thing, you want to make sure that your answer makes sense. Like if you're trying to figure out how many students signed up for history and you get like 25 3/4, well, that's going to be odd to have 3/4 of a student in class, right? So that probably doesn't make sense in that context. Now, you could have 25 3/4 be a measurement. It could be feet, how long something is. But for people, no, that probably doesn't make sense. So now that's not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes we do things with populations where we say, oh, the population is 25.3 million or something, that's okay. But, you know, don't get confused on that part. But, you know, if your answer is a fraction and it shouldn't be, that might be something to look for. Or if it's negative and it's not, you know, and that doesn't make sense, you know, watch for that too. Okay, those are just some tips. We'll give you some examples. That's the best thing to do for these problems.